I feel like we've all been in Los Angeles a part of a grand experiment to see what happens when the federal government decides they want to roll up on a state or roll up on a city and take over.
The Trump administration deployed additional troops to Los Angeles today as part of its response to protests against Trump's deportation raids. That's in spite of opposition from the city and the state. Nearly 5,000 National Guard troops and Marines are now in Los Angeles. California Governor Gavin Newsom said today he's filed an emergency motion in federal court to block that deployment. Joining me now from Los Angeles is NBC senior correspondent Jay Gray. So Jay, there's 5,000 troops in the city of L.A. and a legal challenge from Governor Newsom. What's the latest from where you are?
Well, David, right now, within the last 2 minutes, we've seen really a back and forth here between protesters and the line of California National Guard police that are stationed here. Pepper spray has been fired. We've had flashbangs to move people back. We've seen some pushing back and forth between protesters and police. The first we've seen that has reached that level of escalation today. It had been a relatively calm day up until this afternoon when the crowd started to build and then began to push in toward the line here. It was when they brought in new military vehicles to station out here outside of the Federal Center here that this really escalated. We're going to spin around just this is all unfolding right now, but if you look down the street, you can see that there is a line of police at the end of this street, and it appears that they may be beginning to push some of the folks out of this area right now. They have been spilling out and into this area, into the street, for the last couple of hours. The crowd just growing significantly at that time. And again, it's what we've seen now for 5 days, an escalation of tensions and frustration, and then a pushback from law enforcement here, David.
Well, you know, Jay, we've got musing from the White House about the Insurrection Act. We've got demonstrations possibly spreading to Washington with that big military parade that's happening. I mean, what is the president saying about escalations?
The president has not backed down a bit. He continues to say that he will fill, and I'm quoting him, this area with soldiers. He says that this is an operation that's going to continue for as long as necessary. In fact, we learned today that the immigration roundup that's ongoing right now could continue for 60 days. So 60 days of this as possible as they continue to carry out these raids in areas all across the Los Angeles area and rounding up what we now know to be dozens of people who are being detained here right now. So again, we've just seen what is another level of escalation here. And you can see how some of the crowd here, some of the protesters have spread out a bit. They were all up and right next to the line of California National Guard and police here. And like you talked about coming into all of this, David, more troops are on the way. Marines are now on the ground here in Los Angeles. Their roles aren't exactly clear at this point. And we know, as we've talked about, that the governor, the attorney general here has asked the courts for a temporary restraining order to limit what those troops can do.
All right, Jay, thank you so much. That's NBC senior correspondent Jay Gray. Jay, stay safe there. Thanks so much for your time, man. Protests in Los Angeles have the U.S. president pushing the boundaries of his power.
Last night was terrible. The night before that was terrible. There were certain areas of Los Angeles last night, you could have called it an insurrection. If we didn't get involved, right now, Los Angeles would be burning.
But overriding a state to deploy the National Guard and then suggesting its governor be arrested, well, those are not the only ways Donald Trump has been overstepping. U.S. judges have ruled against his deportations and his tariffs. And today, when asked about the state of the judiciary in the United States, Canada's Chief Justice offered a stark warning.
There is no doubt that the rule of law and the judicial independence is under attack in many countries in the world. You know, when you see governments attacking the media, attacking the judges, attacking the lawyers, and universities, of course, that means that there's a good chance that you are in front of a dictatorship, autocratic government.
Okay, the power panel is back to talk about this. Emily Nicolas, Françoise Boivin, Michelle Caderio, and Kate Harrison. Emily, I'd like to start with you. I mean, the scenes we're seeing in Los Angeles, the deportations, mass deportations of people without due process, the threatening of institutions of higher learning, such as Harvard. This is a fragile moment in the United States right now. I just wonder what you make of that and what the Chief Justice had to say.
A fragile moment. You're such a diplomat, David. It is a moment where democracy is under attack. This is how democracies fall into dictatorship, is when you start to have military oppression and physical violence and random arrests towards people who disagree with the government. This is something that we've seen in several parts of the world already, in terms of this is how you have a government that is technically elected, but you lose your power as a citizen to basically have freedom of expression and oppose the policies of the elected government, or even sometimes vote for a different government. I cannot imagine, if things stay as tense as this, midterms happening in a normal universe. And so this is very important to realize the gravity of what's going on, and to go back to the last segment about, we're trying to normalize our relationships with the U.S., I think was mentioned in the terms of commerce. I know that it's the Canadian economy, and I know that we already had in the last couple of months a realization that it's important to turn away from the U.S., but there is always the tendency, every time Donald Trump is slightly nicer to us, to try to, go back to our old habits, not realizing that there's a real serious chance that we're chamberlining this and really cozying up to a government that is turning back on values that Canada's been built on, and that if we are staying close to the U.S., it is also Canada's reputation and Canada's own internal affairs that are also at stake. And so I cannot stress how grave all of this is. And I'm grateful that the judge started to use real words and not the kind of euphemism that we usually tiptoe around when it comes to this topic.
Well, Françoise, I use fragile because there are other F words I'm not allowed to use on television, but they also apply equally to this moment. I mean, there is going to be a military parade in Washington, D.C. on Saturday to coincide with the president's birthday. While the National Guard has been sent into a state without the consent of the governor for the first time since LBJ did it to deal with the integration of the school system in Alabama, I think in 1965. I mean, what are your thoughts on sort of what you're seeing right now?
Honestly, it's absolutely. I'm gobsmacked. Is that what you say in English? Mm-hmm. I was listening to Donald Trump this afternoon on CBC News World, giving a speech in front of some guards of, I don't know, they look pretty young, and I won't tell you what image I had in my mind at that moment in time, but the way he was talking about every immigrants in the States, as if they're all criminals. The way he was demeaning towards democratically elected officials, like a governor. You might not like them, but you should respect them if you believe in democracy. About the mayor, about anything, I'm just in shock. And when you're talking about what we're going to be witness to this weekend with this parade, I had another image, which was, I know another leader that loves to have the army parade in front of him to celebrate all type of things. And I'm talking North Korea. It's just frightening. So when I heard the Chief Justice, Richard Wagner, come out today and still be diplomatic, because he was asked specifically the question about Donald Trump and what was happening in the States. And he more likely put it around the world, saying that there's many countries where this is happening. And yes, basically what he was saying is that if it talks like Trump, if it acts like Trump, it has to be kind of right now not very democratic. So he was careful in his choice of word, but at the same time, he was direct in saying the rule of law, the judicial independence, and all the other things that he mentioned. And he had good example that could apply in the States or other countries right now. Well, yes, it was definitely not a democratic country. Right. And that saddens me tremendously. And I don't know how we come out of that. Will Americans have to suffer some, I don't know. But when you see the army coming just to shut people up when it's part of their constitution, Americans, stand up for your constitution. You have the right to speak your mind and say politely, without violence. And it seems that it's not the case no more.
Well, Kate, it's 4,000 National Guard and 700 Marines deployed to Los Angeles, by the federal government. I mean, there's no question populism is sort of been on the march in a lot of places, and Trump is sort of the apex of that. But, as a prisoner sort of geography here in Canada, I mean, when you look at that, I mean, how should we respond to this as a country when you've got to normalize the economic relations to some degree because Sault Ste. Marie, Algoma Steel, the auto sector. I mean, there are people losing their jobs by the day right now.
Yeah, we're not obligated to go in lockstep with everything the United States does.
No, but it spills over, potentially, right, is the problem.
It definitely, it does spill over. I think, there are a lot of politics and a little bit of hyperbole at play here. Like the National Guard has not interfered thus far with protesters. They are there to protect federal property. It is the president's obligation to protect federal property by the means he deems necessary. So there is politics on both sides here.
Right, but look, there's a reason even here in Canada why when there's a wildfire in Manitoba, the Premier has to request it. Canada can't just send the military in, right? There is a respect of boundaries here that has been kind of trampled with this.
Yeah, and I would say that may have something to do with Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass's opposition to the ICE raids that are happening. So there are politics there on both sides. I would say when it comes to Canada, we have a different approach. We don't have the same level, I would say, of kind of military oversight or the changes that have happened south of the border, which I would say are a little too close and a little too friendly, certainly for my liking. Military parades on birthdays, I think, is a strange move. I'm just saying when it comes to the deployment of the National Guard in this instance, there is quite a bit of hyperbole at this particular juncture because there have not been violent clashes with protesters at this point in time.
No, I mean, that is true. But, Michelle, it is the first time in 60 years something like this has happened, right? Going back to Lyndon Johnson. And, when you're in the suburbs of Rome, you pay attention to what's happening, right? I mean, what's your thoughts on what you've seen over the past week here?
Well, I think it's a reminder for Canadians to maybe not take everything for granted, right? Most of us watching TV probably weren't alive last time that happened that you referenced, or certainly weren't really watching TV. I think we also do remember January 6th as another situation that was certainly a cause for alarm in terms of something so close to us in cities that are so familiar to us. And I think that makes it even eerier, right? There's so many Canadians who've probably visited Los Angeles at one point or another, and so it feels that much closer. But what I would say is that, as Canadians, we've got to focus in on Canada, and we've got to take and see what's going on there and have our eyes wide open. What started out as innocent, protests against moves by the president is seemingly being escalated by a whole lot of different characters and by a whole lot of different sides, and I think that we're not immune here in Canada to protests happening, to blockades happening. There's certainly a lot of different things that are going to be happening in Canada that is going to that not everybody's going to agree with, and so we all have a responsibility to comport ourselves in a better manner, and the government has a responsibility as well to protect us without stifling us, and I think that's kind of what I'd be looking at for the government.
Okay, Emily, I got about 40 seconds left in the show. Just quick final, or not in the show, but in this segment. Quick final thoughts from you on this.
I think it's worth reminding people what the protests are actually about without using go-around words. ICE is coming in communities, especially in Los Angeles, where there's a lot of people who've been living there for years, who are parents, children, who are being deported, some of them back to their countries, some of them also to random other countries, such as, Salvador has been it's not deportation if you're not actually taking people to the country to which they're citizens. Children are not given rights to an attorney, and so communities are being torn apart, and you are seeing scenes of parents being torn away by ICE agents where their children are in school. This is completely inhuman, and this is an attack on human rights, and this is what people are reacting to. And if that is playing politics, I think it is a really, really mellow words to use for something that is also the collapse of the rule of law. Because if you don't have rights, including for people who are not citizens, you don't have a democracy anymore.
Yeah, there's going to be big implications for Canada with the Safe Third Country Agreement and other arrangements on that, just in terms of how this government is going to approach it. Conversations we'd like to have, ministers on the show, but we've got to say goodbye to the power panel right now. Emily Nicolas, Françoise Boivin, Michelle Cadario, and Kate Harrison.